There's something about the woods at night that feels wrong. The air gets colder, the silence grows heavier, and the shadows between the trees seem to move on their own. For most people, camping is about campfires, marshmallows, and sleeping under the stars, but for some unlucky souls, those nights turned into chilling nightmares they'll never forget. Tonight, I'll share with you 5 terrifying real-life camping horror stories, encounters so disturbing, they'll make you think twice before ever stepping foot in the woods again. I grew up in Oregon, where camping is practically a rite of passage. Dense forests, endless trails, hidden lakes, it's all right in your backyard. By the time I was 17, I thought I'd seen it all. But one camping trip in particular made me never look at the woods the same way again. It was mid-October, the kind of chilly night where you can see your breath even before sunset. My friend Tyler and I had hiked a few miles off a lesser-known trail to set up camp. We wanted isolation. No noisy families or drunk college kids nearby, just the crackle of our fire and the sound of the trees swaying in the wind. By the time we had our tent up and a fire going, the forest around us was already pitch black. There's something about that kind of darkness that feels heavier than normal. The flames lit up a small circle around us, but outside that, just endless black. We ate, joked around, and eventually settled into the kind of half-silence you get when the night is too still. That's when Tyler froze mid-sentence. "Do you see that?" he whispered. I followed his gaze past the firelight. At first I thought it was just another tree trunk, but then I saw it. A tall, thin figure standing maybe 20 yards away, barely visible between the trees. At first I thought it was a trick of the shadows, but then it moved. It wasn't walking though. It was just swaying, left and right, slowly, like someone rocking on their feet, and it was facing directly toward us. I felt my chest tighten. My brain kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe another hiker, maybe someone who got lost. But who just stands there, watching silently without a flashlight or any gear? Tyler called out, "Hey, you okay?" No answer. Just that slow, unsettling sway. I felt exposed sitting by the fire, so we both stood up. Tyler grabbed the hatchet we'd used to chop firewood, and I shined my flashlight toward the figure. That's when I realized how pale the face was, almost unnaturally pale. The second the beam hit them, the figure turned. Not quickly, not startled, just a slow, deliberate turn, like they wanted us to know they were leaving. And then they walked deeper into the woods, swallowed by the darkness. We stood there for a good minute, waiting for some kind of sound, footsteps, branches breaking, anything. But there was nothing, just silence again. Neither of us slept much that night. Every gust of wind, every twig snapping outside, we were convinced the figure had come back. By morning, we packed up fast, but before we left, Tyler insisted we check where the figure had been standing. When we got there, the ground was soft, covered in pine needles. And sure enough, there were footprints, bare, human, and they led straight toward our campsite, then back into the woods. The strangest part, they weren't deep, like someone walking normally. It was as if the person had just been standing there, rocking in place for a long time. To this day, I don't know what we saw. Maybe some deranged person living in the woods, maybe something else. But whenever people talk about how peaceful camping is, all I can picture is that pale face, just watching us from the tree line. Back in 2015, my cousin Jason and I decided to do a weekend backpacking trip in the Rockies. The plan was simple: hike in about 10 miles, set up camp by a stream we'd spotted on the map, and stay out there 2 nights before heading back. The first day went fine. We hiked most of the afternoon, reached the stream just before dark, and got our tent set up. After a long day of trekking uphill, we passed out hard. The next morning, Jason woke me up early. "Dude," he said, shaking my shoulder, "there's a campsite nearby." I stepped out of the tent, rubbing my eyes. Across the stream, maybe 100 yards away, was another setup. 2 small tents, a folding table, and a ring of stones where a fire had clearly burned recently. But the weird thing, nobody was there. We crossed over to check it out. At first I figured maybe they'd gone for a morning hike, but the more we looked, the stranger it seemed. Inside one of the tents was a sleeping bag, still zipped, with clothes piled neatly next to it. In the other tent, there was a backpack, partially unzipped, with food wrappers spilling out. On the table sat a half-empty water bottle, condensation still inside, like it had been left overnight. It felt wrong. Too recent, too lived in, but empty. Jason called out a few times just in case. "Hello? Anyone out here?" His voice carried through the trees. No answer. The woods around us were quiet. And I don't mean peaceful, more like hollow. Not even birdsong, just a thick silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. We hung around for maybe 15 minutes, circling the site, looking for signs of where they'd gone. There were no trails leading away, no footprints in the dirt, nothing disturbed. It was like whoever had been there had just vanished in the middle of using the place. Jason wanted to pack up and leave right then, but I convinced him we should wait a little while. If these people came back and saw strangers snooping through their stuff, it could cause problems. So we returned to our side of the stream and kept an eye out. Hours passed. By late afternoon, the site still looked untouched. No one came back. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to Jason shaking me again. His face was pale in the glow of his flashlight. "Look," he whispered, through the mesh of our tent. I saw across the stream. The other campsite was dark, no lanterns, no fire, but one of the tent flaps was open. I knew it had been zipped earlier. The flap swayed gently in the breeze, just wide enough for someone to slip in or out. We lay there frozen, listening, and then came the sound. Faint splashing, like bare feet stepping into the water of the stream. Jason whispered, "They're coming over." I don't think either of us have ever moved so fast. We grabbed our packs, shoved everything else into the tent without even rolling it up, and just started hiking back in the dark. Every few minutes we'd stop, listening, convinced we were being followed. But the forest behind us stayed silent. To this day, I don't know who those campers were, or what happened to them. But the way that tent flap moved on its own, and the sound of footsteps in the stream, I know we made the right call leaving when we did. Back when I was in college, I had a buddy named Derek who loved camping more than anyone I've ever met. If he could have lived in a tent year-round, he would have. So when he invited me and 2 other friends on a 3-day trip to the Appalachians, we jumped at the chance. The first day was great, hiking, fishing, setting up camp near a small clearing with a fire pit already built by other travelers. By nightfall, we were sitting around the flames, laughing and telling dumb stories. The woods felt calm, safe, almost too safe. Around midnight, Derek decided he wanted to take a quick walk down to the stream we'd passed earlier. He said he wanted to fill up his water bottle and maybe try night fishing. We gave him some crap for going out alone, but Derek was the most outdoorsy of all of us. If anyone could handle a midnight stroll through the woods, it was him. He grabbed his flashlight and headed off. We could see the beam bouncing through the trees for a while, then it disappeared. At first, we didn't think much of it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. By the 30-minute mark, we started to get nervous. Maybe he got turned around, one of my friends said. But the trail to the stream was a straight shot, hard to miss. We called his name. Nothing. The forest swallowed our voices, throwing them back at us in faint echoes. Finally, we decided to go look for him. All 3 of us grabbed flashlights and walked the trail. About 5 minutes in, we found Derek's water bottle lying in the dirt. The cap was unscrewed and the bottle was empty. "Derek," we shouted again, louder this time. Still no answer. We made it all the way to the stream. The moonlight reflected off the water, but the banks were empty. No Derek, no footprints besides our own. We stood there unsure of what to do. That's when I noticed something strange. On the opposite side of the stream, in the thick brush, there was a faint light, like a flashlight beam. But it was steady, unmoving. "Derek?" One of us called out. No reply. The light just hung there, glowing faintly through the trees. We crossed the stream carefully, shining our own beams into the brush. But when we reached the spot, the light vanished, gone, and there was nothing there. No footprints, no broken branches, no Derek, just silence. At that point, panic started to set in. We searched until our batteries began to die, then reluctantly headed back to camp, hoping Derek would turn up by morning. He didn't. The next day, we searched again, farther this time, still nothing. Eventually, we hiked back to the trailhead and contacted the rangers. They launched a full search and rescue operation that lasted nearly a week. Helicopters, dogs, dozens of people combing the woods. Not a single trace of him was found. Here's the part that still gives me chills. On the 3rd day of the search, one of the rangers pulled us aside. He asked us to describe the flashlight we'd seen across the stream. We told him it looked like a normal beam, nothing special. The ranger frowned and said, "That's not possible. You were searching in the exact spot we found last year's missing hiker's gear." Apparently, another camper had gone missing in almost the same area 12 months earlier. His pack, boots, and flashlight were found abandoned, but he was never recovered. Hearing that made my stomach drop, because what we saw that night, that steady, ghostly beam of light in the brush, maybe it wasn't Derek at all. To this day, his case is still unsolved. And whenever I think back to that night, I can't help but wonder if the forest itself wanted him. A few summers ago, my girlfriend and I decided to spend a weekend camping by a remote lake in northern Minnesota. The spot was gorgeous, towering pines surrounding a crystal clear stretch of water, far enough off the beaten path that we didn't expect to see another soul all weekend. The first night was uneventful. We swam, cooked over the fire, and watched the stars until we fell asleep to the sound of crickets. It felt perfect, exactly the kind of escape we'd been hoping for. The second night, though, was different. Around midnight, I woke up to a sound echoing across the lake. At first I thought it was an animal, maybe a loon or coyote, but as I sat up and listened closer, the hair on my neck stood up. It wasn't an animal, it was a scream, high-pitched, desperate, human. I shook my girlfriend awake and we both sat in silence, straining our ears. The scream came again. This time it was clearer, carrying across the still surface of the water. It sounded like a woman in pain, long, ragged, almost like it was being torn out of her throat. "Hello?" I shouted instinctively, my voice echoing back. The scream stopped. For a few minutes, there was nothing but the quiet ripple of the lake. Then just when we thought it was over, the scream came again, but now it was closer. We couldn't see anything across the water, just darkness and the faint reflection of the moon. But the sound was definitely moving along the shoreline, circling the lake. We doused our fire and climbed into the tent, too terrified to move. The screaming continued, sometimes distant, sometimes so close it felt like it was coming from just beyond the thin fabric walls. At one point, my girlfriend whispered, "Maybe someone needs help," but something deep inside me knew better. The voice was too distorted, too inhuman. It didn't sound like someone who wanted help. It sounded like someone trying to lure us out. Eventually, the screams grew fainter, fading into the distance until they disappeared completely. We stayed up the rest of the night, listening, waiting, but the woods stayed silent. At dawn, we packed up quickly and left. As we were loading our gear, I looked out across the lake one last time. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. On the opposite shore, pressed into the mud, was a line of footprints, bare, leading from the trees straight into the water, and stopping there, as if whatever had been there had walked directly into the lake and vanished. I've been camping my whole life, but I've never gone back to that lake. Some things you just don't risk twice. I used to work seasonally at a national park in Colorado. One summer, a coworker and I decided to camp out in a remote section of the forest after a long week. We picked a clearing a couple miles off trail, set up a small fire, and settled in for the night. It was quiet, eerily quiet. The kind of silence where you start to notice your own breathing. We tried to laugh it off, roasting marshmallows and swapping stories, but there was this underlying tension in the air neither of us could shake. Around midnight, I noticed movement just beyond the firelight. Not the kind of random flicker shadows make, but something solid, something pacing. I froze and nudged my coworker. "Do you see that?" He squinted into the darkness, then went pale. "Yeah, something's out there." The firelight only reached about 20 feet in any direction. Beyond that was pitch black, but every few seconds we'd catch a glimpse of it. Something tall, moving just outside the glow. Too fast to make out, but too big to ignore. At first, we thought it might be a bear, but bears don't circle like that, and they definitely don't stay silent. We kept stoking the fire, hoping the flames would scare it off, but whatever it was didn't leave. It just kept pacing, just out of sight. Then the sound started. A low, guttural breathing, heavy and deliberate. Not an animal's panting, more like someone trying to imitate human breathing, but not quite getting it right. It would come in bursts, long, deep inhales followed by short, rasping exhales. My coworker whispered, "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer because I was trying to keep my eyes on the shifting shadows. At one point, I swear I saw it. Two faint glints, like eyes reflecting the fire, but they were much higher off the ground than any person should have been. We debated running for the car, but the trail back was nearly 2 miles, and that would have meant plunging into total darkness with whatever that thing was behind us. The only thing keeping us safe was the fire, so we sat there clutching our knives, listening to it circle. The pacing would stop for a few minutes, the breathing would fade, and then it would start up again from another side of the clearing, always moving, always watching. The worst moment came around 3 a.m. when the fire began to die down. The shadows crept closer, and so did the sound. That's when we heard it. 3 sharp knocks like knuckles rapping against a tree trunk. Knock, knock, knock. Both of us leapt up, tossing every bit of wood we had into the fire. Sparks shot into the sky, the flames roared back to life, and the clearing lit up bright enough to see beyond the tree line. And just for a split second, we saw it. A massive figure taller than any man standing between the trees. Its skin, or fur, or whatever it was, looked wrong, stretched tight, almost glossy in the firelight. The eyes caught the flame, reflecting bright white for a heartbeat before it turned and bolted into the woods with inhuman speed. The forest went dead silent after that. No breathing, no pacing, nothing. Just silence so thick it made my ears ring. We didn't sleep. As soon as the sun rose, we packed up and hiked out without saying a word. Neither of us ever told the Park Service what we saw. Who would believe us? But I know what I felt that night. We weren't camping alone, and whatever was out there in the dark, it wasn't human.